It won't make a ball. No clay. Very little. Very crunchy. That means high salt content. Oops. Anyway, so what we have here is brown sandy silt, which we already knew from the indications of the plant and the bedrock. And you may say, well, but all you're doing is recording the modern environment when you do that. How do you get from that back to the ancient environment? Well, the main thing is by using our modern understanding of the plants and the environment and how it interacts, we can then apply that knowledge to what we find from the pollen cores, which gives us our time depth, and say, back in the Neolithic, they had prickly oak, but they had more deciduous oak. Therefore, the climate is such and such, because we know the way those two trees interact. And this is the way you can gradually build up your environmental picture in order to set those ancient and modern cultures both in a good physical environment.
Now, another aspect of our environmental work is to help answer the all-important question, why do you find sherds on the surface in a particular place? And this is a really complicated and important question, because you don't find sherds everywhere, and you don't find the same kinds of sherds everywhere either. So there are various reasons for why you find them in a given area. There are natural processes that make this possible. For example, erosion. You can have the wind blowing off the topsoil, and that will act as a sort of excavation and reveal the sherds for you. You can have erosion by water. Water will flow along and cut a gully, and you'll have a nice scarp that you can look at and see sherds and other ancient things in. Then you'll have the action of animals. They run around and they break the cracks on the surface of the ground, and that also will help to speed up the process of erosion. Or they'll run up and down terraces that aren't being used anymore for cultivation, and collapsed terraces will again release sherds into the open. Another set of processes are very unnatural, and that includes things like bulldozing, just removing whole layers entirely, or digging for water in order to build pumping stations. Those are excavations as well. And those are all ways that will get sherds out onto the surface. And another obvious one is simply through cultivation. Plowing will bring sherds up to the surface as the plow goes along the ground.
I remember the very first day walking up to the little church, Aya Caparini, up on the hillside here in Annapolis, and the two directors of the project were saying, oh yeah, there are some sherds, let's pick up sherds, and I was looking at the ground going, this is all Terra Rosa soil. I don't see any sherds. So in one day, you learn a lot, and you learn to spot those sherds very easily.
In the next section on field methods, we'll be concentrating on the Frangocastelo area in eastern Sfakia. In this color-enhanced satellite image, dark red indicates vegetation and therefore water, obviously important for human settlements. The dark spots along the coast show where abundant fresh water comes to the surface, and they show up on this aerial photograph, as do roads and field divisions. The environment is important in all archaeological work, whether on an excavation or an archaeological survey. Excavation is digging holes in the ground in one place, which gives you very precise information for the excavated area of that one site. Archaeological survey is collecting finds from the surface over a larger area, which gives you more diffuse information for a number of sites. Both excavation and survey usually involve sampling. There are very few sites that have been completely excavated and very few regions that have been completely surveyed. We chose to organize our sample of Sfakia by environmental zone. In the Frangocastelo area, a coastal plain, we decided on the intensive coverage that you get from walking transects. These are walks of 500 meters, north-south or south-north, with 3 or 4 walkers covering a strip 50 meters wide. In survey, as in excavation, it is important to know exactly where you find things and exactly where you don't find them. So we stopped every 50 meters on each transect to look, within a radius of a meter, for ancient material, mostly pieces of pottery or sherds. Of course, we stopped anywhere on transect if we found things, recorded the information, and collected the diagnostic pieces. But stopping every 50 meters, whether or not we were finding sherds, means that we have a very detailed picture of what we found and where we found it.
Now we just come up to 110 metres on this transect. I've just seen a pile of stones on the surface here, and it's evident that the number of sherds has increased dramatically. I've just picked these up. There are two enormous pieces of a base and a handle and a rim.
See, this is the second piece of black glaze that I picked up, and the largest.
Yeah, isn't this lovely,
Lovely.
though? And we find this is the only place, am I right, Simon, from the plain proper
Yes,
where we have
that's
black
right.
glazed pottery.
So, and this is going to be, say, 3rd century BC.
I would think so,
Um,
and it probably goes with the Kasala site, which is back behind us all the way into the mountains.
Right.
And so this would be the harbor.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that fun? It's shaping up, and then plus we have these water sources. Nice spring over to the west where the big fig tree was, and there's another spring right where that fig tree is. You just see the top of it. There's another big spring there, and the mill. So it's a well-watered area.
In spite of what it looks like on the surface. It looks barren, hopeless, appalling.
Well, it's because all
Yeah.
the water is
Yeah,
low down.
that's right.
It's rushing off of those mountains and going right down through the breccia and then coming out at about sea level. And we started off today walking up here. This is transect 1. And we each walk about 15 meters apart across this, and we all walk in a straight line due south until we fall off the cliffs into the sea. And then we move over 50 meters and then run another 50-meter wide transect going up. And we seem to have been doing very well today on our compass bearings. So we've
It's
been,
spot on.
we really have. It's been, and everyone's matched on the way back too, lining up with the trig points. At the moment, we're stopping at this point. This little place here on the map is the church of Ayuskaranambos, which is right over here behind us. And Simon is at this point, and he's falling off the cliff as he should be. And Tracy has this line, and she gets to go another 100 meters. I only get to go about another 150 meters. And then we're going to do a mosey down here on these cliffs because of the change in sea level. We can certainly imagine that there was activity down here in the late Roman period at any rate, which we found at the end of this transect. When we moseyed in this area, there's a big spring, and we have mortared walls and probably cisterns down along here.
Once the site had been discovered on transect, the next stage was revisiting.
Well, we're sitting here at one of our favorite sites on the Frango-Castello plain. And the reason that we like it so much is because it demonstrates exactly why you need to do revisiting after you do your transect. We transected basically a bit to the south of here, and so on the northern edge of our transects we picked up a few sherds. And when we were revisiting 2 years ago, we thought, well, we better go check them out and see what's up here. And lo and behold, when we got here, we discovered an enormous site, just a tiny piece of which had been clipped by the transect, and an enormous and unusual site in that it consists of no fewer than 15 different clusters of pottery and often building stone, like these great lumps that we're sitting on here, completely separate each from the other, but clearly part of the same big entity. And it's all prehistoric. There isn't a shred of later material to mess up the dating. And there's a very wide range of dates within the prehistoric period, too.
In the pottery that we did pick up, it looks like we may have a few pieces of early Bronze Age, of fruit stand base and things like that. But we also have very clear Middle Bronze. We have barbotine wares, and we also have fabrics that are the very characteristic protopalatial types of fabrics with calcareous inclusions in them that we have on the north coast of from Hanyas. And we've also picked it up down here in Sfakia at other sites. So this isn't the only one we have it, but we have these beautiful pieces of painted kainakis from here for late Bronze 3, which is unusual. And how many painted sherds have we found in this survey?
From the Bronze Age, oh, I don't know, fewer than 10.
Yeah.
And most of them are from here. Most of them are from here because this material was so fresh that the paint hadn't had a chance to wear itself off. And of course the whole story about why this pure prehistoric material, each still in these 15 nice clumps of pottery and building material, why was it all so nicely laid out for us when we came back here 2 years ago? And the answer is a brutal one. It's because this is an area that was bulldozed. The upper layer was removed, and the whole thing was peeled off to reveal this Bronze Age material.
Yeah, because one of the features of this plain is that it's been buried probably between the end of the late Roman and the Venetian period in a stratum of kind of a gray, sandy sediment mixed in with shores of that period. And it varies in depth from the coast. Down by Ayas Nikitas, it's maybe 20 centimeters deep, whereas as you get up here, it gets to be deeper and deeper as you move towards the foothills. And we would only find Bronze Age material in, say, new olive groves that were being planted, and we'd find them around the new planted olive trees, which made us very suspicious on the pattern. And then, lo and behold, we finally found this site, and then it all became very clear about how deep the Bronze Age material was buried.
And we're in the Franco-Castello plain, and I'm standing along a line of stones that you can see here on my right, on which are growing carob trees. Now, carob trees love to grow on stones, and we have found them to be extremely useful markers for ancient structures. You'll see that there are more behind me, also growing in a line. So we've closed in on the carobs and the stones that were once part of ancient buildings, and then we looked for pottery to go with them to give a date. And what we found here was stuff like this. This is a piece of Phocaean Red Slip, which is made in Asia Minor, the west coast of Turkey, and is late Roman, so 5th to 7th centuries AD. There's also tile, this great big clunker here, probably went on somebody's roof at some point. And then, not nearly as abundant, but certainly present, are pieces of prehistoric pottery as well. And this is a nice piece of early Minoan, in fact, around 3000 BC. So this is a very satisfactory site found by surface reconnaissance. But we're standing right near a gully cut by water, and we went to look in the section below, and there we found confirmation in the section of what we found up on the surface. Down at the bottom here, we've got prehistoric material, like this Minoan sherd that I just found. And then above that, this is actually a wall that's going into the section sort of diagonally like this. And that is probably going to be a Roman wall going with the stone piles and Roman material on the top. And also right in this section are these really very big sherds that they're going to go along with the Roman period. So here we have in section what we saw on top on the surface.
We move now to another site in the Franco-Castello plain, which has Roman material, building stone and carob trees, and agricultural terraces.
Now, the terraces seem not to be contemporary with the Roman buildings. One can see irregularities in the system of terraces that appear to result from earlier walls and other features having been incorporated into them. And what we think has happened here is that perhaps in the Middle Ages, when the Roman field system had fallen into decay, people came back to this area and took it into cultivation, and many of the pre-existing walls they recycled into terrace walls, but there were some remains of the Roman walls that were still in sufficiently good condition to be incorporated into the new system.
Looking at walls of structures and terraces can reveal the order in which they were built. Documents, too, are useful in survey work, sometimes for dating buildings, but also to supplement and test the environmental and archaeological information collected. For example, 14th century Venetian documents tell us that Franco-Castello, the castle of the Franks or Venetians, was built to protect people in Sfakia from pirate raids.
The Sphakia Survey uses documents as far as it can to complement the archaeological evidence which it has collected. We have, for example, a document of the early Venetian period which describes the boundaries approximating to those of modern Sfakia. When the Venetians took over the island, they divided it up among a number of noble families, one of which, the Spicules family, was given an area of land which approximates to that of modern Sfakia. The perambulation describing their land begins down on the sea at Franco-Castello in the east of the region, goes up through the White Mountains, swings round the north side of the White Mountains, drops down the west side of the Samaria Gorge, and ends at the church of Irumeli behind me, down on the sea in the western part of the region.
Many people think that fieldwork is the beginning and end of archaeology, but in fact the analysis and interpretation of finds takes at least as long. Some of the work is very mundane, literally doing the dishes or finishing the washing up, as seen here. All our finds are now in Hania, outside Sfakia on the north coast of Crete. The finds are the property of the Greek government and are kept in the Archaeological Museum. An important part of our work and of the final publication is a site catalogue and database, listing environmental and archaeological information about each of our 250 sites, plus detailed descriptions of the finds. This database, along with more general work on the three main chronological periods of the survey, and specialist study of pottery, stone, and bone, will form the basis of our final analysis and interpretation. It is the pottery that will take up most of our time, and rightly so, as the sherds constitute our single largest group of finds and provide the basis for dating sites and human activity. Here, two pottery specialists, Margareta Hahn and John Hayes, look at late Roman and Byzantine sherds.
Now, pottery is what we find most of in this project, as in other archaeological projects, so we spend a lot of time on it, looking at it, and studying it, and analyzing it. And there are two main distinctions that are important here between coarseware and fineware. Courseware is pretty much what it says. It's used for cooking and for storage. And this piece here is a Minoan tripod cooking pot, or part of one, and it's still rough to the touch, even though it's got most of its original surface on it. Most of the prehistoric pottery found in Sfakia is coarse, and we're very reliant on fabric analysis in order to date it. Because the thing about courseware is that it doesn't change much over time, so it can be very difficult to date. Now, fineware, on the other hand, tends to change more frequently. Fineware is the good china, the wedgewood, what you eat off and drink out of, and so people like to have it changed fairly frequently. And this is very good for us in terms of dating, because if you've got fineware, you're more likely to be able to date it.
If you don't look at our material, our ceramic stuff, in terms of fabric from a surface survey, you really lose about 90% of your information. I would say at the most 10% of the material we pick up has any kind of shape or surface preserved on it. So we're really kind of stuck with little crumbs, sort of like this, things about this size are the sort of things that we really would like to try and be able to date. So one of the ways we do this is through the technique of fabric analysis. And that involves looking at the hardness, the texture, the color of the clay, all of these things combined. Within Sfakia itself, we have a couple of regional wares, which are fun, and one in particular is tempered with sponge spicules. So these are the little bits that are left of a sponge. They're little white, short, hairy-looking things, and they're particularly common in the Spicules plain for us. And the reason that I think this is true is that in the Apokorana area, which is just to the north of Spicules on Crete, you'll find that almost all the clay sources there have sponge spicules in them naturally. So it's actually occurring in the paste, not as an added temper.
Because pottery is so important in survey as in archaeology generally, it's helpful to know how pots are made. We were lucky to meet a potter who knows about clay sources, tempers, fabric, decoration, kilns, and firing. His name is Christophoros Sklavenitis, and he makes modern versions of Byzantine and Venetian sgraffito ware. We went to see him in his studio just outside Hania. Each vessel is made on a potter's wheel and allowed to dry until leather hard. The pot is then dipped into slip. The decoration is incised with a sharp point, sometimes on the wheel, sometimes freehand, like these fish. After the pots received their first firing, the slip has turned white. The next stage is to add details and glaze, which will change color in the second firing. The gray and orange will turn to shades of green and yellow and blue. This particular type of pottery, therefore, requires extensive knowledge not only of pot making, but also of glazing and firing.
We began making the video about the Sphakia survey a few years ago, when I myself took some rather amateurish footage, which does, however, serve to record the participation in the survey of 1988 and 1989 of students from various countries, from Canada and from the States and from England. And it also records the process of revisiting sites, here a Roman grave in the Innopolis plain. More recently, though, we have had the help of a professional cameraman, Charles Beasley.
4 articles on the work of the survey have appeared so far, and the final results will be published as a book. We're grateful to the institutions that have provided financial support. We'd like to thank everyone who's helped us, particularly the Greek government and the people of Sfakia.